Alright, I expect this to be the last video that I make. I realized what I was missing. I knew there was something about the ages that was throwing me off. And I had forgotten that Amy is definitely older than Wanda. It said that Amy started school late, and despite that, she's still in Wanda's class. That tells us that Amy is older than Wanda. So she's going to be the fifth youngest. We can eliminate the 2 from that row, which means we can, now that we have this 5, we can eliminate the 5 here. And we can go along the columns and eliminate the 5s. And on this side, we can eliminate all these 2s. Okay. Now then, Amy seems to be fairly constrained with the potential possibilities for her line here. It's going to end up that she's either 2, 6, or 7 here. To 6th or 2nd, 6th or 7th in line to the helm. I forgot this one. We've established that Tim is the youngest, which means we can eliminate this 1 from this portion. Although we should have eliminated that far sooner when we realized that when we found out that Violet was born in January. And how is that interesting? That is interesting because there is now only one space that can have a 2 on this row. And that is this cell here, which means we can eliminate this 9. We now know that Tim was born in January, which means that we can eliminate the 2 from the rest of his column. And something tells me that there's an 8 we're missing, and I'm trying to figure out where it is. Let's see, is there any other place that can only have a 2? That seems to have helped in the past, though it's not particularly useful now. We can't eliminate this 1. Okay, here's something. The birth month for Violet is January, or yeah, the birth month for Violet is January. We can eliminate that from David's potential birth months. The fact that we now have 5 and 9 here means that we can eliminate that we have a 5-9 pair, which means we can eliminate the 5 and the 9 from these possibilities. In other words, David is in the 6th grade, We can eliminate now 6 from this position and the 6 from this position. Okay. We now have a 5-7 pair in this column, which means that we can eliminate the 7 in this position. We now know that Wanda was born in June. We also know from that Amy was born in July. This 7 means that she is not in the 7th grade. She's actually in the 2nd grade during her scene. This 2 rules out this 2 down here, and we already have the 7 that we can rule out as well. And now we have Amy's column completely filled out. Knowing that Amy is in the 2nd grade allows us to rule out the possibility that Jane is. Jane getting ruled out of the 2nd grade means that we can confirm that she's definitely 2nd in line. Her being 2nd in line means that Jim is 8th in line. By the way, we do have Jane's column also completely filled out at this point. And now we can also say that we have Jim's as well, because being 8th in line means that he is not 4'8" at the time of his scene. And this 3, Jane being in 3rd grade, rules out this 3 here. And now we know that Tim is in the 9th grade during his scene. We can eliminate this 9. And this 9 here also means that we can eliminate this 9. I didn't do it earlier, but Chris can't be born in October because we already know that Jimmy is. So I'm going to rule that out now. All right. This gives us a decent completion here. It's not entirely finished, but we've come quite a ways. The only ones that are missing, real quick, let me finish the column for Tim. Tim is going to end up being 3rd in line to the helm. And we now have a bit of a problem because there's no way to easily resolve this 5-7 pair, this 5-9 pair, this 5-9 pair. It looks like we are a bit stuck. And if this were an ordinary Sudoku puzzle, we would be. Fortunately, one of these things that we are unaware of, let's see, is the grade. Are the grades here between Wanda and Chris. And we know how their ages compare. We also know that Chris's scene comes only 2 hours after Wanda's. That fact, conjoined with the fact that one of them is in 5th grade and one of them is in 7th, and the fact that we know that Wanda is older than Chris, means that we can say that Wanda is in the 7th grade and Chris is in the 5th. That means Wanda is also 4'7". Sorry, my bad. Almost screwed up the whole puzzle there. That means Wanda is 4'5". That David is 4'9". That since we've established that Chris is in the 5th grade, we can rule the 5 out of his height. We've established that David is 4'9", which means that Chris is 4'7" instead. And now we have this 5-9 pair. The 9 is ruled out here. The 5 is ruled out here, so we can eliminate the 5 from Chris's birth month. The only thing missing here is his place in the line. The only number we're missing here is an 11. The only number we're missing for Wanda is a 10. And that leaves us with one single cell remaining, one cell here left to resolve. David was born in May, Taurus, and he is the first in line to the helm. All right. Now that we've solved this, let's take a look at our line and see what it means and why that is the case. So some of it makes sense. Roger being fourth and Violet being immediately after, I've already commented on. And this is all in reference to the rules of succession laid out in scene number 1. That's referred to here. And one of the things in that is you've got to have a legitimate child in order to be eligible for the helm. Roger thought he was in line for the throne because he thought that Jane was his legitimate child, and so did everybody else around that table. They were wrong. Jane was actually turned out to be Greg's child, which means that he was ineligible. But then who is eligible if not Roger? Well, the rules of succession say, well, if it's not Roger, then it's going to go to Roger's kids, so that would be Jane, right? Okay, so under that idea that unfortunately Jane is illegitimate, so it can't be her. Her kids are ineligible because none of them have legitimate children at the time of Alistair's death. So that's not possible either. So now that we've exhausted Roger's possible descendants, let's look at Violet's, who would be next logically in line. Okay, well, Violet is married to Melody. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means pretty definitively that Amy is not her biological child, and that means Violet is also ineligible for the helm. And Amy, not having a legitimate child of her own, is ineligible for the throne, as is Melody. Moving on, okay, so now we've exhausted Alistair's line, so we're going to have to move on to Alistair's siblings. So that would be Jim. What do we have to say about his place in the line? He would be 8th, but under our understanding of how the line works, we've gone through Roger and Violet and their descendants. So now we're looking at Jim. Jim doesn't have any legitimate children because Greg was born out of wedlock. Okay. And the reason why we know that is because there's a point in scene number 12 where Roger specifically calls Greg, if I can find the specific point. My legitimacy wasn't the issue, Roger says, talking to Greg. But you've always been a bastard. This is supposed to indicate that Greg was born out of wedlock. Okay. So if Greg's illegitimate, what about Greg's children? Well, those are both ineligible because neither of them have legitimate children. Okay. So we've gone through the entire family and determined that all of them are either illegitimate or ineligible. So don't we have to go back and restart the process, allowing those who were illegitimate or ineligible to claim the helm? Well, we would, but there is a slight wrinkle. And you can actually figure this out if you pay close attention to the story itself. The key here comes in scene number 11. At one point, the narrator of this scene, in other words, Tim, says, I wonder, not for the first time, if I would have been better off if Mom and Dad had stayed on Earth with Grandpa Billy and Grandma Betty. What does this tell us? Tells us that Billy and Betty, who we know better as Elizabeth, are Tim's grandparents. There was one final caveat that had to take place before the entire helmsman selection process was reiterated, allowing illegitimate and ineligible people, and that was this through the spouse of the helmsman. The helmsman's spouse has a sister, and through that sister has a legitimate child. We know that she was pregnant in scene number 7. There's a few clues leading to that conclusion. There's also the fact that in scene number 9, Violet talks about somebody wearing her aunt, which makes sense if, the someone she's talking about is the fetus within her aunt. And so that child was legitimate, and that child has kids, and we know that because that child ended up having Elizabeth's child ended up having Tim. So Elizabeth's child married Jane and had Tim. That was Anthony. And what ended up happening, if we might be able to guess from scene number 5. Dad is speaking to a teenager further down the platform. Anthony, my mother's last request. In other words, this isn't meant to be concluded from this, from this little passage here, but the idea is that Alistair's wife, Roger's mother, gave up her seat on the arc sign to her nephew Anthony. Later on, Anthony ended up, as spoken about in scene 11, a girl is so starved for familial affection that she elopes with a boy that she thinks is her cousin. That's Jane with Anthony. Also, in scene 12, I know about Jane's big scandal, but then who doesn't? And the conclusion here is that if we return to our family tree, Anthony is the child of Elizabeth and Billy. This line allowed David to be first in line to the throne, Jane to be second as his potential regent, and in fact his actual regent. Jane is the person whose name was actually in the envelope as regent for David. Then came Tim, third in line, and finally after that point, they can go back and reiterate the selection process for the new helmsman, this time allowing people who are ineligible or illegitimate in the first round to qualify. So now that Tim's in place, if we go back here, Roger's in 4th. Violet, his sister, is in 5th place. Amy, Violet's daughter, is naturally in 6th. Melody is 7th as a potential regent for Amy. Now that Violet's branch of the family is exhausted, Jim would be 8th. Greg would be 9th as his son. Wanda, Greg's oldest child, would be 10th. Chris is 11th. And Bridget, who has been effectively disinherited by this wraparound aspect of the family tree, and the fact that Jane is Greg's daughter and not Roger's has effectively been disinherited and is last in line to the helm. I hope you enjoyed the solution. I know some of these videos got a little bit rambly, but I'm glad you went along for the ride. Thanks for watching.